This episode is brought to you in part by Exoterra. If you're as passionate about reptiles and amphibians as I am, you know that quality matters. I use Exoterra products on all my reptile and amphibian enclosures, which is why I'm excited to be partnering with them. From naturalistic decor to innovative lighting and enclosures of all sizes, Exoterra has everything you need for your cold-blooded companions. Exoterra. Make your reptiles feel at home. This episode contains a paid sponsorship placement for True Chroma by Faunalux. Lighting reptiles isn't just about brightness or giving UVB, it's about illuminating the world that animals actually thrive in. Introducing True Chroma by Faunalux, a premium, revolutionary LED spotlight purpose-built for animals. Faunalux has worked with lighting experts and biologists to develop something totally new. Reptile Vision Technology, a bespoke single-source chip delivering high levels of visible light and proportional UVA1. That means your animals can get true full-color vision for the first time. Tried and tested by zoos, vets, and passionate keepers worldwide, True Chroma is now available at fauna-lux.com/expertidiot10 for 10% off your order today. True Chroma from Faunalux. Educated by nature. This episode is brought to you in part by Unlimited Exotic Pets. Every day is Veranda Day for Nick Lillis, and it shows. At Unlimited Exotic Pets, Nick produces high-quality monitor lizards with a deep commitment to ethical care practices and top-tier nutrition. These aren't just pets. They're responsibly bred, ethically raised animals. Whether you're looking for a new companion, starting a breeding project, or anything in between, Nick has you covered. Unlimited Exotic Pets, keeping and breeding quality without limitations. Love reptiles? Don't miss this. If you're passionate about reptiles, amphibians, and everything cold-blooded, Reptiles magazine is a must-have. Each issue is packed with expert care tips, stunning photography, and the latest news in the reptile world. Whether you're a seasoned herpetologist or just starting your reptile journey, this magazine has something for you. Subscribe today and stay informed on the best ways to care for your scaly friends. For only $14.99 a year, you can step outside your algorithm and get exposure to things that you wouldn't normally see or learn about. My family reads Reptiles magazine, and you should too. Visit subscribe.reptilesmagazine.com to get started. This is the Expert and the Idiot podcast. If you like the show and you'd like to support us, there's a link to our Patreon in the description below. Some benefits include getting access to new episodes up to a month in advance. There's also links to USARK and USARK Florida. If you're not already a member, please sign up. Enjoy the show. All right, welcome to episode 71 of The Expert and the Idiot. Today I'm talking to Lisa Benson of Benson's Boas. And thanks for coming on today, Lisa.
Thanks for having me, Adam.
What kind of snake are you holding right now?
This is a Pokegron Suriname, BCC, and his name is Sandro. And he was produced by Eric Rollins of HK Constrictors.
Cool.
He's a 2-year-old.
Are you more into localities or are you more into, morphs?
Almost purely localities. I only have one morph boa.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. And what kind of morph is it?
He's a sunset boa, and he was my first boa, and he's a pet, and I have him. He's pretty and he's beautiful and really sweet, but I have no plans to produce with him or anything. He's just a nice boa, and I love him. But I really got into locality boas, and you could go off in so many directions with boas, and I realized very early on that you kind of have to focus because you have a limit in your resources and your time and everything. And you have to kind of pick a direction. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of reasons why I decided to go with localities. And I, even within localities, you have to focus. So, I did. And I work with about 11 localities now. And this is one of them.
Oh, wow. And what kind of like which locality is your favorite?
Oh, that's a tough question. I think I'm really drawn to the Brazilians, the North Brazilians, and the Amarelli boas, both the what some people call the Brazilian Amarellis and also the Bolivian Amarellis. I have pretty large breeding groups of those, and also the North Brazilian BCCs. I'm those are probably, I'd have to say those are probably my favorites, but I also really have some other localities that I'm very, very fond of. I love the Terra Humeras. I've recently acquired in the last year some Honduran fire bellies that I absolutely love. And so yeah, it's hard to pick a favorite.
Yeah.
They're all pretty wonderful.
And how did you get into keeping snakes? When did it all start?
Yeah, it all started when I was a kid. I grew up in a wooded area, and back in the day, we played outside from morning till dark, and it was kind of a wooded, swampy area, and I was out there, herping all day long, and
Yeah.
and I used to, find salamanders and snakes and turtles and frogs and all kinds of things, and I was always fascinated by them. And also, I was into dinosaurs of all things, and so reptiles always fascinated me. And my cats used to, of all things, bring snakes back to the house and present them to us. And they say, "Hey, Mom, look what I caught." And a lot of times the snakes would be a little bit traumatized, sometimes not really hurt, but sometimes they'd have little puncture wounds. And I got into the habit of, taking them from the cats and kind of evaluating them and seeing if they needed anything and learning about the snakes and deciding, if I could help them in any way. And I would kind of rehab them and then release them back. And so most of them were like garter snakes, black racers. We had, what else? There were some eastern hognose. Mostly though, it was mostly garter snakes. That was really the predominant species in our area. And it's kind of a funny thing. I built all these, wood enclosures, and some I kept in tubs. And, I just would read everything I could. There wasn't much literature about them back then. And, the internet wasn't a thing. We didn't have that. So it was hard to find good information, but I just experimented with, what I found in the area in terms of food options, and kind of created natural habitats for them, and, tried to keep them, in the right kind of conditions, and, rehab them. And basically that's how I kind of started with snakes. And then, as I got older, I kept a lot of lizards, different, mostly animals. And I love lizards too. And eventually, I was really into the horse world. I have horses too. And
Oh, wow.
when I started thinking about what I wanted to do as a retirement hobby, I started thinking that snakes would be something that I would really love to focus more on. And that's how I decided to really expand the collection and really dedicate myself to that. And because, horses, I had to downsize at that point. It's an expensive hobby, and so I, had to stop showing and doing that kind of thing. And so I started building my collection, and that's where I am now.
Oh, wow. And so I was admiring on your YouTube channel the addition that you had put onto your house. Can you kind of walk me through that whole process of like what made you decide that you needed an addition, and then, you know, kind of walk me through the whole process and the dimensions of the room and all that.
Oh yeah. So, you know, originally I was in the second floor. It was my office. I was a software engineering manager, and in my career, and I had, started, you know, using that office space, as I was getting closer and closer to retirement. I retired early, but I was able to, you know, put enclosures into that room. And the more boas I was getting, the more full that room was becoming of enclosures, and they were starting to stack floor to ceiling. The room was 12 by 16, and you know, I was needed to use a ladder to get to the top enclosures, and the room was getting hotter and hotter, and my job was getting more and more stressful. So, so, you know, in meetings, you know, the beads of sweat would be rolling down my forehead, you know, the more pressure that would be on me. And so I started getting to the point where I realized, you know, I was going to need more space. And, you know, my husband is pretty understanding of you know, he's not into the snakes, but he doesn't mind them either. And, you know, I was able to convince him that building an addition would be a good long-term investment for our house anyway, because the new space could be used in the future for other things. You know, if we sold this house, it would make a great, you know, secondary living space as well. So we ended up designing this addition to the house, and it's big. It's the wing that I'm in here is the main room where the adult boas live is 16 by 32. And then I
Wow.
have a baby room that's adjoining it. That is another, I think that's 16 by 14. And then I have a utility room that is between the two. That is, I think, that's, I think, 12 by 8, I believe, something like that. So, and I've got a nice, you know, utility sink in there, a double aluminum utility sink with a sprayer and a hose that can reach both rooms.
Oh, wow.
So and I've got an industrial humidifier that I built in there that, you know, humidifies both rooms. You know, there were a lot of things that I had dreamed of having, that I couldn't do in the upstairs room. And I started thinking about the shortcomings, you know, of being in that smaller room. And I was able to implement those things when I moved down here. And, you know, for example, I had carpet in the upstairs room. And anybody who keeps snakes knows you don't want carpet.
Yeah.
There's nothing like rat juice on carpet.
And so what are you using, like is it just all drywall? Is that what your walls are made of? And what is the humidity like in that room, the ambient?
Yeah. So the walls are drywall, and they have nice insulation. The paint is, I think it's, you know, a normal indoor paint, but the humidity is kept at 60% ambient, and that's all done with a meter. It's monitored with a sensor, and the humidifier comes on if it drops lower than 60%, and will run until it reaches 60%. It's amazing how well that's maintained.
How can you walk me through the design of your humidifier?
Yeah. And I actually did a YouTube video on the construction of that as well. It's on my channel, so
Oh,
if
nice.
anybody wants to check it out. But I used a big 27 gallon, just, you know, tote, a big tub,
Yeah.
and I went to the House of Hydro, which is a website, and they sell components they are ultrasonic foggers. They have, I think they're like piezoelectric heads. And I got a 12 head floating, they have 12 discs in this floating head. And they also sell fan components that are waterproof. I got a UV light that is like for sterilizing the water, and that floats in the tank. And basically it's pretty simple to do. The way it works is the head floats in the water at the right level, and it will shut off automatically if the water level drops. And I also have the light floating in there to keep the water nice and clean. I have the humidifier right by my industrial sink, so it's easy to fill. But now I have the hose, so it would be easy to fill anywhere if I wanted to move it. And I've got a fan that turns on automatically when the humidifier goes on. I've got a big pipe that comes out the top that shoots the fog out.
Oh wow!
And it runs. I don't know. It seems to go off like every few hours for about 5 minutes. And that thing, I don't need to fill it that often. I'd say maybe once every couple months. So it's really low maintenance and works really well.
And so that UV, is that like a filter? Does that have like its own internal pump? Is it like constantly pumping water past the?
No, it actually just sits in the water. It's like a bulb that just sits in the water, and just the presence of that in the water, I guess, provides some sterilization.
Okay.
So nothing flows through it. It just sits in the water.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And you got all that from that website? What was it?
The House of Hydro.
Okay. Interesting.
And so, when you buy an industrial humidifier, something that's capable of that size reservoir and, that kind of output, you would spend, over $1,000 for something like that. And this I was able to make for less than $400.
Oh, wow.
So it was a really good investment.
That's really cool. Yeah, that's and you said that you keep your humidity at 60%?
Yeah, the ambient humidity in the room is about 60%. And I also do periodically, but not as often as I would have to if I didn't have that. I do periodically, about once a week, I will wet down the substrate in my enclosures.
Okay. And are you like going in there and are you misting it, or how are you doing that?
So I have the hose from my sink, and I'm able to, we have great water here, which is wonderful. We have great water here, and I'm able to take my hose from my sink and have a spray attachment, and I can just run to each one of my enclosures and spray into the enclosure.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's so efficient.
Yeah. And what is the ambient temperature in the room?
That's another really cool thing about this room is, and it's something I learned from the room upstairs. Was the room upstairs, I was always battling the house temperature. The house, I was always playing with the vents in the room, because, in the summer, the AC would kick on, and then, I had to have an oil-filled heater in the room to combat the AC, which seemed so counterproductive in terms of energy usage. And in the winter, the heat panels would make the room too hot with the heat coming into the room. So I'm like, this is a ridiculous setup. So when we put this room together, the first thing I did was I said, I don't want any escape routes for the snakes in case one were to get loose. So I didn't want vents in the floor. And I wanted, so what I did was I wanted to keep this completely separate from the house heat. And so we put heat pump in, mini splits. And
Oh, wow.
the two rooms, the baby room and the adult room, are on separate zones, so I can control the heat completely separate from the house and separate from each other.
Wow.
And so I'm not fighting anything. And I keep the ambient temperature right now at 75,
Okay.
which works out perfectly.
That's awesome. So that, and are you do radiant heat panels?
Yes. In all the adult enclosures, I have radiant heat panels, which are pro products, which I really like. I prefer those primarily because they seem very reliable, and also because the plugs cannot pull out.
Hmm.
The one thing I do change with those is I replaced all the standard plugs that they have by default. I replaced them with straight blades because when you plug the plugs that they provide into the back of Herbstats, for example, they don't line up right. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, but they have offset plugs, and they conflict with each other. You know, the way
Oh,
they,
yeah.
and so that drives me crazy. I was an electrical engineer before I focused in software, and I'm very, very I'm a stickler about neat wiring. So I wanted to clean up wiring. So that's the other thing that I did in this room was my wiring is pretty immaculate, and I put straight bladed plugs on all of the heat panels, and so they all go into the back of the Herbstats nice and neat, and I really like that.
That seems like it would be a huge job
No,
with all those
not
cages.
really. It's once you get the knack of it, they went really fast.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, you have how can you like kind of walk me through the electrical in your room, how it's set up?
Yeah. That was that's the other thing is in a endeavor this size, you do have to have special electrical requirements. So even upstairs, I had special electrical requirements that required additional circuit for that room because it exceeded standard household circuit. It was
Mm,
more than 20 amps for the room. So I didn't want to be overloading anything.
yeah,
So this room, I did something pretty cool. I'm going to turn my camera so maybe you can see it. Let's see, I'm going to rotate a little here.
sure.
Can you see up on the wall, high up? I don't know if you can see it. I have, let's see. Yeah, it's not really visible from that angle. Let me see if I can show it on this wall. Yeah, there it is.
Oh yeah.
You
Yeah,
see
there
those
it is.
strips?
Yep.
Yeah, I have power strips that go along the entire ceiling about 3 feet down from the top of the ceiling.
Wow.
And that's a separate circuit from the floor, the regular code circuit. So I have 60 amps in this, 60 amps in each room.
Wow.
And, and, that, and I also have a UPS. So, which is an uninterruptible power supply. So in the
Yeah.
event of a power failure, and we have a generator as well. So in the event of a power power outage, I don't lose everything.
Your
Um,
snakes would have no idea.
they would have no idea. Yeah. Yeah.
Boy, that's really impressive. And that power strip, did you have that custom made?
They're pretty common in industrial situations.
Okay.
So they can be made to any length, and yeah, so you just don't typically see them in houses.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think they
that's
call
pretty
them
awesome. Okay.
plug moldings, and I really liked it because it gave me the flexibility to pretty much plug in at any point, and I didn't have to worry about running ugly wires to places I didn't want them. And so I have a wiring pattern where each stack only has 2 plugs going in, and they're exactly in the same order in each stack. So I'm so anal about this stuff.
And are you using like smart switches and timers? Like, how do you
Yes,
make it so all your lights turn on and off?
that's right. So the other thing I did was, I have all animal plastics enclosures in this room, and the normal way and LED lighting, and each animal plastics enclosure generally comes with an individual power supply. But if you try, plugging in all those individual power supplies, each stack in my room is 4 high. And so you end up with, with all these, plugs going in everywhere,
Yeah.
and all these power strips. And I'm like, no, that's really ugly. That's too many wires. And so what I did was I made low voltage wiring harnesses, and I bought DC power supplies, 10 amp DC power supplies, and I basically made these wiring harnesses that the LED strips plug into.
Okay.
And so I only have one plug for all the lights for each stack.
Wow.
And then they plug the DC power supply plugs into a timer. And so each stack is on a timer, and I've got them set for 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of night. And I can adjust that.
Wow. And are your lights in the room, like the lights up in the ceiling, are those on a timer as well, or are those just on or off depending on if you're in the room?
I turn those on or off depending if I'm in the room, and they're on a dimmer as well, so I can change the intensity of them.
Wow.
And the other thing I did in this room was I wanted to have really good airflow. So the way the room is facing is in the direction of the way the prevailing breeze is. So if I open the windows at each end, I get a wonderful airflow through the room, and I have 2 ceiling fans in here that are always on. And it gives great airflow through the room. I'm a big believer in proper ventilation. My cages are all double ventilated, so I ask for extra ventilation when I have the cages built.
Yeah, it's in my opinion, it's better to have too much airflow than not enough on an enclosure for sure.
The only enclosures I don't do that on are my Brazilian rainbow boas, just because of their extra humidity requirement. I find that if I do the extra ventilation on theirs, it becomes more difficult to keep up with the humidity.
Okay. And what problems does that bring your way?
Yeah. So Brazilian rainbow boas, especially when they're younger, they require close to 100% humidity. And,
Wow.
And if you don't have that, they actually can die. They're very, very fragile without that at young ages, less than a year, for example. In fact, I keep the babies in sterilite tubs because it's much easier to keep them at almost 100% humidity. And then, whereas my other very young babies, the neonates, for example, I keep in racks.
Okay.
The Brazilian rainbow boas I do keep in sterilite tubs because they can seal up and really have great humidity in there until they're old enough to go in an enclosure.
Nice. So did you wire up that room yourself, or did you have that contracted out just to your specifications?
Contracted to my specifications.
Okay.
Yeah, even though I was an electrical engineer, my specialty wasn't in home wiring. It was in digital circuitry and actually electrical distribution and control.
Okay. Wow.
That's
wild.
Power grid, basically.
Yeah. Boy, that's wild. And do you mind if I ask what state you're in?
I'm in Connecticut.
Okay, so you're not in a terribly dry environment to begin with, and you're pretty well suited to maintain that humidity
Yeah,
and
it's
you're
fairly humid here in the summer, spring, summer. The fall and winter are very dry.
yeah. So your humidifier's obviously working harder in the fall and winter.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And how hard do your mini splits have to work during the winter?
They didn't. They were on a fair amount in the winter, but I have a really good one. I have Mitsubishi, and
Okay.
they do really well. Some of the older mini splits weren't as good in cold temperatures. They weren't as efficient, but the Mitsubishi is a really nice one, and it does very well at colder temperatures.
Nice. What so now that you have the room and everything, is there anything that you look at that you wish you would have done differently?
Um, no, I think there's things I can do more. Like I think I want to put some storage cabinets into my utility area, just so that there's some things that are put away a little bit better. Um, but other than that, I am so happy with it.
Yeah,
Just
I
really,
bet.
really, really happy with it. It's like a
Yeah,
dream come true.
it seems very meticulously thought out and like you kind of thought of everything you could possibly think of to set it up right.
It's wonderful to work in here. The other thing about the room upstairs was with all four walls being covered with enclosures and a rack, I had very little space in the center. And you know how snakes are; they reach out for everything. Um,
Yeah.
and so, especially some of my bigger ones, I have one boa that's about she's probably about I haven't measured her actually, but she's a little over 7 feet.
Mm.
And when you're holding her and she stretches out, she can get into just about everything. And if you're in a small room with enclosures everywhere, she was always like reaching towards, and they always go for the rack, because they can wind into that. And
Yeah.
and it's so nice to have this wide open aisle here where, where I don't have to worry about that. And the other thing I have in this room, I don't know if you've seen it in my videos, but I have a boa gym in the middle, which was
Oh yeah.
something I had always, envisioned. For a while, I had a small, like, clothes drying rack that was good for the babies, but it wouldn't work for when they got big and heavy. And this one that I have in the room, I don't know if you can see it in the background here. I'm going to tilt down a little. You see that there?
Oh yeah.
It's in the back, and it's got ropes and ladders, and um, I've got all kinds of. It's got a rock climbing wall, um, and um, I'll put those on there while I'm cleaning their enclosures, and they use all the different parts of it. There's ladders and ropes and different kinds of swings, and they love it.
That's
It's
awesome.
actually I got it on Amazon. It's actually an Avonlea playscape for kids, and I set it up in the middle of the room, and it's come in so handy.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, even just for if you're cleaning an enclosure and you need to set them down somewhere, it keeps
Yep.
them from getting into everything. Cause yeah, that's a uphill battle for sure.
Yeah.
So you said that room is 16 feet wide.
Yep. 16 by 32.
Okay. So with the 2 foot cages on each side, you've got like 12 feet of clearance between
Yeah.
each cage.
Yeah.
Nice.
And if I needed to, I could put a middle aisle of cages in some parts if I wanted to in the future. But right now, I'm enjoying the space in the middle.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's your standard go-to cage size?
So in this room, most of the enclosures are the T25, which is the 6 foot they're 6 foot long by 30 inches deep by 18 inches high.
Okay.
And they all have a basking shelf, which I find that the boas really enjoy.
Yeah. Okay, so they're 30 inches deep. Okay, so
Yeah.
they're pretty they're 6 inches deeper than what I was thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Okay.
think with the larger boas, they really appreciate that extra depth, especially when the hides get bigger. You really kind of need that extra depth.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I can see that definitely. I mean, just looking at my Argentine boa and her enclosure, her hide, is starting to take up more and more space.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I guess maybe like side entry would be nice, where they go in from the side instead of the front,
right.
something like that. That might help.
That might help. Yeah.
Yeah, that's and so it's 16 wide and you said 32 long?
They're 6 foot wide by 30 inches. 6 foot, long by 30
Yeah.
inches wide, and
Oh,
then
I'm sorry. I meant the room is
the room
it's
is
it's
16 feet wide by 32 long.
okay. Nice.
That's
Yeah,
the
that's
main
like
room. Yeah.
that's perfect. That's yeah, I want to get a snake building really badly. It would be I would want it to be they deliver sheds like right to your house, and you can have them custom made and they can go up to 14 foot wide and I think like 34 or 36 feet long.
Yeah.
And I think that would be pretty perfect for what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
And then I would probably make like a room at the end of that, maybe like a 10-foot room with the utility sink and,
Yep.
Whatever incubators, racks, all that. And then go through that room and you're into the main area with all the enclosures. And I could have my podcast set up there and, it would be kind of a dream.
That would be perfect.
Yeah. One day,
You'll get
one
there.
day. Yeah, I'll need to have my whole thing. Ryan Young does the PVC. I think it's called truss core wall panels, and I really like those. But man, does the price add up
Oh,
fast?
yeah. PVC is so expensive.
Yeah, I can't even imagine what it is now because I was looking at the prices before everything kind of took off, so
You
I
bet.
couldn't even imagine what it would be now.
Oh, yeah. The price of construction just skyrocketed.
Yeah.
We saved a lot of money doing this project because I acted as the general contractor.
Mm.
And I hired all the subs. So, and it supervised the project. So I saved a ton of money doing that. If I had hired a general contractor, it would have been out of reach for us.
Mm. And so, how do you manage all that chaos?
Yeah, it was a chaotic time. And it was dusty. It was a little bit of a mess in the house for a while. And we have 2 Jack Russell Terriers, so it was fun keeping them out of the fray, because they
Oh
wanted to
wow.
be involved in everything. When the walls were open, like how do we keep them from jumping into the subspace when the floor was open? It was like, oh my goodness. We have one that's very old and kind of doesn't see real well, and he's partially deaf, and he kept wanting to leap into the into the crawl
Oh,
space, and we're like, no,
oh no.
Sammy, no. So yeah,
Jeez.
it was a project that went on for about 6 months. It was a husband and wife team that were actually doing it. They did a fantastic job, but it was a little bit stressful, but they really did a great job. And the key is to hire great subs. And they did a great job with the framing and the painting and all the parts they did. And then we were lucky to be able to find a great plumber and a great electrical contractor that came in and did their part really well. So the rest of it really came down to the major pieces were the site work, and we've been working with the same person for site work that did our house, and we have a great relationship with them. And then in terms of the foundation, we had a good person come out for that, and then the rest of it was the framing and the insulation, that kind of work, and then the electrical and the plumbing. The plumbing was very simple, so it was pretty straightforward job.
Yeah, that's like the hard, like thinking in my mind, I'm like, man, I'm going to have to like get the building delivered. And then, but like, do you have the plumber lay the pipe for the drain for the hose and your potable coming in? Do you have all that work done before the building arrives, or is it done after the fact? I mean, it can get confusing in, like what order are you supposed to do it in?
Yeah, you do. And you have to work to code too. So you have to check out the code in your area, to make sure. I don't know how you're in Florida, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know how different things are in Florida. In Connecticut, we have, things that are dictated by, for example, radon in the ground, and also frost. We have certain regulations that are related to frost. And so we, had to review the regulations, but we also had good input from some experienced contractor. For example, the guy who did our framing knew a lot, and our site work knew a lot about those regulations, were able to give us some guidance. So in our case, we had to plan ahead for where drains were going to be, and where, so that could be accommodated for in the foundation. And also, you can drill some of this stuff afterwards, but it can be very expensive to do that. So sometimes it's better to plan that ahead and know about that ahead, and so you can put that in easier afterwards. So we found that it was better to think about all that stuff ahead of time. We did make one mistake that was just an oversight because we didn't even know about it. Was we forgot to put notches in the foundation for some of the cross beams, and we had to cut those out afterwards. But it was a minor mistake, and it's pretty easy to cut those in.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of one of the benefits of like the buildings that I'm interested in, is they get delivered in one piece and they don't need a concrete slab. They just put them up on blocks, so that would be, I guess, easier from a plumbing perspective, is I could have the building delivered and then sort of figure out where the sink is going to go and all that fun stuff after the fact.
Yeah. Yeah. I think in Florida, you might have an easier time of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And we have no radon here. So
yeah, we had to put in a whole radon ventilation thing, like it had to have a special tube going into the ground and a fan and all that.
Oh, wow.
Because we're, everything in Connecticut is on granite, basically. So you have to have a special system for that.
Wow. So what having like really taken off with all these boas and getting this really large collection now, like what are some lessons that you've learned from just expanding out and getting all these animals and moving into this larger space?
So I think, in terms of lessons, it's one of the things I've learned is, trying to come up with efficiencies, to make your workflow. One of the things I learned was to separate your feeding groups into groups. So basically what I mean by that is that I have boas that are different ages and are on different feeding frequencies. So when I first started out, I was less structured as far as who was getting fed on what days. And I found that I was feeding almost every day of the week different boas, and it was scattered. But I kept good records. It was all in an app and everything. But I still found that I was feeding different boas almost every day of the week, and that's not ideal because it's just continuous. It's a continuous process. What I ended up doing was I divided up my boas into feeding groups where I have my boas that are on 10-day, which are under a year, that are on 10-day feeding intervals, and then I have boas that are on 2-week feeding intervals, 3-week feeding intervals, and 1 month feeding intervals, and I group them all those together so that all the 3-week boas get fed on the same day. All the 2-week boas get fed on the same day. And that way I set up reminders that are recurring reminders. And I've got what I need to defrost the night before. And that just made it so much easier. So I not only have the calendar reminder that reoccurs and tells me what I need to defrost, but I have I have just the routine, and I can move boas between the groups if I need to, which I've had to do a few times because, like, let's say a boa promotes, like I have a boa that was 2 weeks and now he's going to 3 weeks. I can move boas between the groups, or I have a boa that regurged, for example, and I need to skip a feeding, and that happens. You've got BCCs; they're going to do that now and then. And so, it just works out, just thinking of efficiencies, like the adding of the water hose to get to the cages instead of using, our cart to move things from back and forth. What else? The utility sink is a must. And not having a divider in that sink, because I can take the bins from my rack and put them right into the sink, and I have a high pressure spray nozzle, and I could just nice. get everything out of them real easy. It makes things so much easier. Just the things you learn from going day to day. Having a cart is huge. Being able to go around the room with your feeding or your maintenance, anything you're doing, and keeping your supplies on the cart. It's just so efficient, and things like that. Just the stuff I've learned from doing this every day.
Yeah, I recently got a utility cart, and it's a game changer.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is. I got like I guess it would be like a medium-sized one. It's not like the full size, so it goes through doorways easily.
Yes.
And oh my gosh, yeah, I put a Rubbermaid like tote, like the Home Depot ones with the yellow lid. I'll put that up on top.
Yep.
And I can get all my water bowls out into that. It holds the old dirty water. And then I used to hand scrub all my bowls with Dawn, and I've really just gone over to using a dishwasher and just putting them all in the dishwasher just running it. And it's like no work. You're grabbing the bowls, you put them in there, let it run its cycle, and then you take them out, let them cool off, and you're good to go.
Yeah. Yeah. And before, I used to, after I would clean the bowls, then there's the process of filling them up. So I was, I'd still have to get them from the sink to the enclosure, and you don't want to spill the water or whatever. And for a while I was using a watering can to transfer the water, but that's a lot of trips with a watering can because, I have a fair amount of enclosures. So that's when I came up with the hose idea. And I can either spray with the hose or I could fill bowls with the hose. So,
nice.
And that's just a game changer.
Yeah, that's huge. What I do, I put all my, on the bottom level of my utility cart, I just use gallon jugs, and I just fill those up.
Oh, that's a great idea too. Yep.
Yeah, so when I go to put the bowls away, I've got jugs of water down on the bottom, so I
Yeah.
just put the bowl in, fill it, and I'm good to go.
Yeah, that
But
works great too.
having a hose that can reach around the room is next level. I mean, that makes misting and, humidifying the
Yeah.
cages so much easier.
Yeah. I mean, if you have good water, I know some people don't have that luxury. We live on a farm that used to be years ago before we even lived here was an industrial level chicken farm.
Hmm.
And so they put in a major well that would pump out, I think it was like 50 a minute. I mean,
Wow.
crazy amount of water, good water. And so it tastes great. I mean, it's wonderful. And, we've had it tested. It's really perfect. So it's a real deep well, and we have frontage on a street called, that has a name like Water Street. And so we're like, we've got plenty of water. And, so
Yeah.
we're really fortunate that way. I know some people can't use their native water because it's not good. It's either city water that's got lots of chemicals in it, or it's just got too much mineral in it, or whatever. But ours is perfect, and I love it.
Yeah, I'm on a well as well, and it's super hard water here in Florida. It's just very very hard. So we were having issues with a lot of buildup in the bowls and things like that. I mean, we were getting buildup everywhere. So we had to have a water softener put in. And then when I had him put in, well, we had the water softener, but we got a new one. And when I had that put in, I had him put a under sink RO
Oh yeah,
system in. So now we have RO water for misting and everything else. So there's no more hard water deposits,
that's
which
good.
is, yeah, because there's nothing worse than like spraying and then knowing that you're going to have to eventually somehow
And
clean
that
up the
is so
mess that
hard
it's
to
going
get
to leave
off.
behind. Yeah. I was using hydrogen peroxide and vinegar, which would seem to help break it down, uh, but it would never
Yeah,
fully get it off. And even the bowls now going through the dishwasher cycle, I'll put vinegar in my dishwasher, and like every load, it kind of strips another
yeah,
layer off. But they're almost like months later now. It's almost
that's
completely gone.
good.
Yeah. So we had talked a little bit about the localities and everything. Why boas in general? Why not
Well,
pythons
yeah.
or colubrids
So,
or
so Boas really attracted me at first because one is their personalities. I mean, look how docile these guys are. I mean, this guy has just been hanging out on my hand this whole time, and he's not going anywhere. He's just hanging out here. So one thing I like about
yeah
Boas is their personalities. Um, not to say that there aren't spicy ones. I got bit last week. It's like, but mostly it's feeding response issues, and or babies that are defensive, and and you can work with all those things. I tap train all of them, and to deal with the feeding response, and I handle all of them, regularly to get over the defensiveness. But boas, the other thing I love about them is the structure of them. I love how rectangular they are. I think it's
yeah
just beautiful. Like there's something about the rectangular shape of them and how beautiful their heads are. But I'll tell you what. You know what's on my bucket list? A scrub python.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Oh
I've been
really?
talking to Stephen Kush. Um, I'm really, really drawn to scrub pythons. There's something about the scalation of their heads and their eyes, the shape of their heads, the iridescence, how intelligent they seem. And I've been
Yeah.
looking at those for years. And his channel really just sparked me even into high gear. So I've been looking at, in particular, the smaller species of scrub python, the Nauta, the Somalian Nauta, and
Yeah.
when they
Yeah.
become available in captive, born and bred, I really want to get into those.
Yeah, absolutely. They're super
Yeah.
cool
Do you have any
pythons.
scrubs?
I do not. Being in Florida, I think I can have the Tannenbars and the
That's all I can
Halmaheras.
have
So
too.
those are my.
Yeah.
Oh,
In
really?
Connecticut,
Interesting.
we
Why?
can't have any amethystine.
Why?
That's a good question. We can't have reticulated pythons, rock pythons. We can have
Wow.
Burmese, but we can't have any of the big, the big pythons. Uh,
To me, it just like it
it
doesn't make
doesn't
any sense why you wouldn't be able to, because like up there, you never have to worry about those animals surviving
exactly. If they
outside. You
got
get
loose, they would die. Yeah, so I
yeah,
don't get it. They consider them dangerous animals. Yeah,
really
but
okay.
to me,
Apparently,
I mean, I don't think I don't know. I don't see them as any more dangerous than a very large boa constrictor.
yeah, or a
Yeah,
dog,
exactly.
you know.
Exactly. Like, a dog could be just even more dangerous.
Yeah, if you gave me the option of being bit by one of your Jack Russells or one of your
Yeah,
biggest boas, I would take the biggest
yeah,
boa for
exactly.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of nonsensical. I guess it's a lack of
That's
experience,
really
you
what it
know.
comes down to. So
Yeah,
so that's why, I mean, I do love the bar neck look and the Malukan look, but I can't have them.
yeah, yeah. You have my
Yeah.
sympathy. So, do you have any
I'm going
Argentines?
to be, I'm hoping to pick some up this year. Yeah.
Really? And who do you plan on getting
I
yours
think the
from,
same
and like
person
what
you're
line?
hoping to get yours from.
All right. Yeah, that's we'll leave it at that
Yeah.
for now. We don't want to give away our source. Yeah, that's they are my I think Argentine boas are my favorite snake. I think it's just like if I had to pick one snake to own, I think it would be an
Oh,
Argentine boa. My
they are pretty cool.
yeah, my female really won me over, and then I got a pair of babies, and they've been fantastic. I did run into an issue with regurg from at the very beginning, and I think I was just feeding too much and too soon.
Yeah.
It was too much, and just they hadn't had a chance to settle in, and I backed off the frequency, and I pushed it out to every 10 to 14 days compared to every 7 to 10.
Yep.
And it seemed like after I did that, everything was pretty much squared away.
Yeah.
I was talking to Dr. Booth about that, and he was reaching out to his friend Keith McPeak, and and getting the information that, you know, with them, to sort of treat them like a BCC, where they can be a little bit more finicky when they're younger, and it's a long game, and you just have to kind of take your time with the feeding, and it's not as straightforward as an established adult or a like a BI, you know,
Yeah.
which you can just kind of hit with food a little bit
Yeah.
faster.
I found that the most sensitive currently in my collection are certainly the BCC, mostly the North Brazilians and the Amarelli. In particular, the not the Brazilian Amarelli, but more so the Bolivian Amarelli are more sensitive than the Brazilian Amarelli. And the North Brazilians seem to be a little more sensitive too.
Yeah.
I haven't had trouble with Pokegron. These guys have been perfect. They've never regurged. But I do feed on the conservative side for sure. Like, if you go on that 10 to 15% of body weight, I'm on the small end of 10% with the BCCs. And I really look at their body condition very closely. I'm like one of those math nerds, so that's the engineer in me. I even graph their rate of change in their weight, and
wow.
I look for a very, very linear, slow rate of growth, especially in those first 2 years. And like this guy's 2 years old, and I love his body condition. It's muscular, and he's never had a problem with regurg. I think he's grown up perfectly.
And what size feeder is he on?
So he's still on large mice.
Okay.
And I'm really happy with that. I love where he's at. I don't have any rush to grow him, any faster than he's growing.
Yeah.
Really happy with him.
Yeah, especially with the BCC, I totally understand not wanting to run into that issue of regurgitation. So how have you handled regurgitation when it has come up in the past?
Yeah, so regurgitation is a tough one. I have I do use Nutrabac with my BCC and BCA. So it's a probiotic powder for anyone who hasn't used it. And it seems to help a bit with their digestion. I never feed more frequently than their processing cycle. So one thing I'll do is I double check their temperatures in their enclosures to make sure that they have the proper temperatures. You don't want it too hot, but you also don't want it too cool. And I find with the BCCs, they do well at about 88 degrees hot spot. Hotter than that, I've actually had a problem. And cooler than that, you can have a problem. So I find they're a little more sensitive to that optimal temperature range for digestion. The other thing I find is that they do require the humidity for proper digestion. So I do make sure they always have, good humidity in their enclosures. The other thing is, never feed them more frequently than that 10-day interval. If you start stacking food in them, that's when, before they've had time to process it, you're looking at a regurg. Once you have a regurg, there's a debate on whether they need to be fasted or not. I've tried both ways, and I find I am having better success if I do at least skip one feeding in between. Specifically, especially if it's the first time they've regurged, I do skip unless they are so young that and underweight, that skipping a feeding might jeopardize, their health. But if they're healthy and it's, an out of the blue regurg, skipping a feeding isn't going to hurt them. So I will do that. Now, I have started playing with something recently that I know some people in Europe have been doing and with great success, and I actually have seen remarkable results with it. And I've started to adopt it, and it's kind of an unusual thing. I mention it only because I am seeing good results with it, which is the use of donor horse serum. And what it is this is a serum that's produced from the blood. It's spun out of the blood of horses that are, and it's used in laboratories for cell cultures, growing cell cultures. And it is used to stimulate cell growth in laboratories. And what what was discovered in Europe was that for boas that are regurgitating, is that the if you put the horse serum into a prey item, it can not only seem to help the digestive tract heal, but it also seems to help the boa kind of stimulate their growth a little bit. And, it seems to kind of kickstart them.
Wow.
And so I procured some from a laboratory, and I used it on a boa that was failing. This was a boa that was a failure to thrive. And in fact, every single litter mate had passed from regurg syndrome. This was not, this was a boa that, beautiful little boa, but every single one of the litter mates had passed from failure to thrive. And so and this one was starting to fail. And I'm like, I've got to try something different. So someone I had been talking to on Facebook recommended this horse serum. And I'm like, well, I'm going to lose this animal if I don't do something. And so I figured I'd give it a shot. And I did. And the animal turned around and is now gained weight and is I have no doubts this animal's going to make it. And so now I'm like, there's something to this. And I've used it on a couple others that have regurged, and I'm a believer. So this is the first time I've mentioned it publicly, but
Interesting.
I do think there's something to it.
And so now you wouldn't use this on just a normal, healthy baby boa. This is only once you're dealing with a regurgitation issue?
Yeah, this is only once I'm dealing with a regurgitation issue that, has happened a couple times, like more than once. And, I'm really concerned that there's a cycle going on. And, I don't see that too often, but when I do, if I need to break that cycle, this seems to work.
Wow. And it can just regular people get this, or do you need it to get it through a vet?
You just have to find a lab that sells it. I went to a lab that's in Rocky Mountain Biologicals, and they sell it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And what do you think the mechanism is that's helping there?
It's that's above my pay grade as far as what the science is behind it. But I know that to stimulate cell growth in culture, like when they're developing, when they're trying to study like when they try to develop cells in a like petri dish, they might, for studying something, they might add this serum to the cell culture to grow it. And somehow it stimulates growth. So someone must have thought, well, why don't we try that, in a prey item and see if it does something. And
interesting.
I don't know how it was originally thought of using it, but so what I do is I put, I'll put like if it's depending on the size of the boa, I'll put like a couple milliliters into a mouse. These are frozen thawed mice, and I'll put a couple milliliters in before I feed, and also put a little dusting of Nutrabac on, and it seems like it's done the trick. So
nice.
I don't know the science behind it, but I was like, it was a Hail Mary at that point because I was going to lose this guy.
Yeah. And you said that keepers are using this in Europe?
Yeah. That's where I got the idea.
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder if it'll catch on.
I don't know of anyone else who was doing it here. But I also didn't, this is the first time I've even mentioned it publicly. Cause I didn't, I don't want to, it certainly isn't something that is, has been discussed. I haven't never heard of anybody talking about it here. So, and I don't want to blanketly recommend it. I'm just saying that, for me, it turned things around.
And so you said that you've tried fasting them after a regurg and then just skipping the fast, or skipping just one meal?
I've tried fasting for, a month. I've tried fasting not at all. I've tried, skipping a meal. I've tried, I pretty much always use NutriBac on the BCCs.
Yeah.
So what I found was, I think the fasting does help. I know there are people who say they don't need to, but I do find that it does make a difference.
And are you using the NutriBac regardless of regurgitation?
Yeah,
okay.
I do. For most of my BCC and BCA, I do.
Okay.
Just as a supportive, kind of as a digestive support.
Sure. And how, and you're just putting that on the feeder before you give the feeder?
Yeah, just a little dusting.
Okay. Have you noticed any other health issues, or is it just the regurgitation that you've had to deal with?
The only other health issue I ran into here was I had a prolapsed hemipede during a breeding trial. And that was an interesting thing. Was a very interesting experience, but unfortunate. But luckily, it I was able to save the animal, and he'll be able to breed in the future because luckily they have two.
Yeah.
But he did end up having to have one surgically removed.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, he was actively in breeding trials. And towards the end of his season, and I came in one morning to, doing my check. And I saw him in the water bowl, and I'm like, well, that's awfully strange because he doesn't usually do that. He's usually with the female, they were always on top of me. He was always on top of her. And, he was a very, very engaged breeder. And he was in the water bowl, and I'm like, oh, that's odd. So I looked at him more closely, and I see that he's prolapsed, and I'm like, oh no. So I pulled him out. I did a video on this too, so if anyone's interested, they can see on my channel the whole story of that, which has pictures of the prolapse and the whole timeline of that. I was able to get an exotic reptile vet out here. I'm very fortunate to have a mobile exotic vet that comes out here if I need to. And she came out and set up here, and, she was able to, sedate him and try to work that prolapse back in. She did get it back in. I had tried first to get it back in, and he was just too muscular and tense for me to successfully do that. I tried lubricating it. I tried preparation H, but he was too tense. So when she came out, she was able to sedate him. And if you've ever experienced a sedated snake, it's kind of scary because, as a cold-blooded animal, they take a long time to come out of sedation. And they almost seem like they're dead. I mean, it's kind of scary because they go under hard, and then they take like hours to wake up. And so I was kind of scared because this boy is very precious to me. And, but, she was able to get it back in, and she, put a few stitches in to try to hold it in place, hopefully so that it would, slide back into the proper, channel, overnight as the swelling went down. But unfortunately, in the morning, when I did my check, first thing in the morning, it was out again. And in fact, both hemipedes were out. And I'm like, oh no. So at that point, when I contacted her again, she says, you really need to bring him into, a veterinary surgery. So I'm not far from Tufts University. which is a great veterinary, and they do have a veterinary hospital, and they do have exotic animal vets there. It's a teaching hospital too. And so I brought him up there, and they saw him right away. And they took him into surgery that day. And I left him there overnight. And they were able to remove one of the hemipenes, and the other one went back in. And he came back home the next day, and he recovered beautifully, and he's doing great. So I'm hoping the female is gravid. She's showing signs that she is. So she would be due in mid-July if she is. And so keeping fingers crossed, because she's a beauty.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But that's the only other health issue I've had.
Really? And so how do you handle bringing new animals into your collection?
Yeah. So one thing I also do is I've tested every animal that's come into my collection. And I do it when they arrive, because I feel like I test them for IBD, the RNA testing. And I understand, there's flaws with that testing in terms of, they're not always shedding that virus, the arenavirus rather. So I understand that you really have to test, potentially multiple times to be perfectly accurate, if there is such a thing as perfectly accurate. But the best time to test is when they're stressed. So I figured that the best time to test is right when they arrive after shipping, because they're stressed, right? Yeah, so even though they're not showing any signs of sickness at that time, I do swab them and send the swab into the lab in Texas, and RAL is who I use. Okay. And then until, and then I'm quarantining them. I still use my upstairs room for quarantine. And that is what I do. So, to keep the collection safe. And I pretty much have a closed collection at this point. When I add new boas, that's what I do.
How long is your quarantine?
My quarantine is at least 6 months.
Okay. And how do you do any preventative measures for mites in your main area, or is your preventative measure just a good long quarantine to ensure that any new animals coming in are free of mites?
Yeah, it's that. And I also don't, I don't, if I very, very, very much limit who comes here. So, if someone wants to visit, generally the people I've had visit don't own snakes. So, they're mostly local friends who are just curious. But if someone who has snakes wants to come here, I would certainly ask that they don't handle their snakes and that they change their clothes, in terms of biosecurity, sure. Wash their hands and stuff. But in terms of biosecurity with, if I go anywhere, I would not come into this room until I have, completely changed my clothes, showered, and scrub myself down.
Yeah, I get that. It's a scary world out there. There's a lot of diseases and mites, and
that would be a nightmare.
Have you ever had a boa come back positive for arenavirus?
I've never had that happen.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, that I think that's a good thing. And I'm sure that when you were acquiring your collection, I'm sure that you were making sure that you were going to the best sources, right?
That's right. I have actually, and it's a good point that you bring up, because I don't acquire boas from shows. I have really acquired my collection from very few people. And they are very trusted people, people that have mostly closed collections, and people that have established a reputation in the industry. for years and years and years. And even then, I test and I quarantine. But I've worked with people that, I've repeated relationships with. And so it would be.
Who are some of your top favorite breeders?
Yeah. So in terms of probably one of my top favorite breeders is Brian from Boas.
Sure. Brian Vilmanov.
He has been a source of some of my best boas.
Yeah, he's a great dude.
Yeah. I've gotten a lot of my locality boas from him. He's a good friend. And Allison Thues, Crispy Steaks, is another great breeder. Gotten a lot of boas from her, a lot of my North Brazilians from her. Matt Mueller from Maryland, and also Ted Brennan and Christina McEwen from California.
Yeah.
They are they raise great Bolivian Amarilli. And
nice.
They don't have an internet presence, but they are very, very good into the Bolivians, and I trust them implicitly.
Yeah. Who did you get your Tarahumaras from?
The Tarahumaras were I have two pairs. One is from Brian V from Brian Boas, and the other is from Michael Beach.
Okay. Yeah, they're one that I'm interested in. I'm not.
You will love them.
Well, and they're like to me they kind of remind me of a small Argentine.
Yes, they do have a pattern that reminds you of Argentine. They are fantastic little boas.
Yeah. How big are yours? Like how big could one expect them to get?
Mine are sexually dimorphic to an extent. The females are substantially larger than the males. My females are close to 4 feet. The males are more like 3 feet and not as thick. And they're the same age. They are charismatic little boas. They're funny as heck because they're loud, but it's all bluff.
Yeah.
Kind of like the Argentines.
So now do they maintain that hissy demeanor like later into life, or do they lose it?
It starts to tone down. When I first got them, they were pretty loud. I mean, and the funny thing is they get real rigid. So what's funny about it is it makes them easier to pick up because they get so rigid, they become like handles. So you can go in and just pick them up real easy because they become like little hissy handles, and you can just lift them up. But they don't bite. They just make a lot of noise, and it's funny because it echoes. It echoes in the enclosure. But they do quiet down a bit as the more you work with them. And but they're another boa that'll just sit on your hand for hours. I mean, you can just hang out with them. And their color scheme is so cool, their pattern and color scheme, because you really have to see them in hand to appreciate it. The iridescence and the subtle colors. I have some that have the most amazing coral and pink and green and blue in their pattern. And it doesn't show up in photographs. It's just stunning to look at.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but it is very hard to capture what a snake actually looks like in a picture to get.
It's frustrating as heck, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, it's like you're seeing like 30% of what the actual animal looks like.
Yes. And some snakes in particular are, certain color schemes like peaches and oranges and the pinks are very hard to show.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the Argentines like really grow out of that hissiness. My female though, her last shed cycle, she had defecated in her hide and I had to move her off the top of it, and she just growled at me. It was incredible. Like she hardly opened her mouth, and just made this like really low rumbling growl. It was pretty
like a
wild.
cobra.
Yeah, it sounded like a dinosaur. It sounded like a T-Rex, like, or what you would imagine T-Rex sounds like.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really, really incredible animals. The Tarahumaras, I definitely want to get some at some point once I have my building.
Yeah. Well, I hope to start producing them in the next couple of years. They are fantastic boas. Definitely one of my favorites.
Yeah, I can see why. I can definitely see
And
why.
they're so easy to keep. Their husbandry is so simple. They're not sensitive to humidity requirements or temperature requirements. They're good feeders. They don't need big enclosures. Everything about them is easy peasy.
Yeah, it seems like when everybody hears boa, they imagine this colossal snake. I don't understand why these smaller localities aren't more popular. I mean, are they harder to reproduce?
They reproduce in smaller numbers. So Terrahumera litters, a couple things. Boas don't reproduce every year. So you have to pretty much skip years. And the other thing is that, the smaller boas have smaller litters. The other thing about Terrahumeras is it seems like a lot of times they have very sex specific litters. Like a lot of times they'll have a litter that is mostly females or, all males, or it just seems that way. And, so they get snatched up really quickly. They're not as available as other boas.
Do you think do you think that there's something external that is causing that, that swing in one direction or the other as far as the determination of sex?
That's a really good question. I wonder if someone like Dr. Booth would have some input on that. I don't know if it's a genetic thing, like something that is, due to the fact that, supposedly all the Terrahumeras came from one pair. All the Terrahumeras we have in the country are supposedly from one pair of Terrahumera.
That is bananas.
Isn't that bananas? And that came to the country, I think, back from someone in University of Arizona back in I think the 1990s, and it's really incredible. And some people think, well, inbreeding, it's got to be bad, right? But there's something to be said about the fact that when you have a population that is that inbred and there's no real problems with it, it could be that all the problems were eliminated and it's pretty hardy now.
Yeah.
So some of these island boas are like that too.
Yeah, I mean, from an evolutionary standpoint, that makes sense, right? If they're forced to inbreed and there's no other option, and there's babies born from every litter that fail to thrive and can't go on to breed, you'd think that eventually you would end up that they would either fail as a species, right, and cease to exist in this insular, fashion, or they're going to be primed to thrive in that scenario.
And Terrahumera are kind of like island boas because they live in these essentially mountain islands that are at 4,000 feet elevation, in these isolated environments, and so they're very much like island boas. That's
so cool. And you said that they're hardy as well, right?
Yes, they seem very hardy. They're just incredible little boas. Their personalities are wonderful too. Like, they are boas that will come out as soon as I open the glass. I slide the glass on the enclosure to maintain their cages. They'll come right out to me And I can't actually leave the doors open very long because they'll come right over and want to come out onto my arm. When I'm doing anything in their enclosures, they come right out onto my hand. They're very forward and very friendly, very trusting little guys. I love them.
Wow. And what size enclosure do you keep those in?
Those are in T12s, which are 2x4s.
Okay.
4x2s, I should say.
Yeah, 4x2 by 2 or 4x2 by 1.5?
1.5.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're on my list. I just don't have the space. It's so annoying.
Oh yeah. You will. The other boa that I'm looking to add in the next year or two is Hog Island.
Oh yeah.
I love speckles. I just love speckles. And that's one of the things that drives me crazy about the North Brazilians is all those speckles. And Hog Islands are just speckles galore, and they are so variable throughout the day in terms of their color. They go from very light colored to getting quite dark. And that fascinates me, that the color changes. That it's almost chameleon-like, except it isn't related to, I don't think it's related to their background like chameleons, but I love their head shape. I love their personalities. So I'm looking forward to getting into those too.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You said the speckles, but it's the contrast. It's the speckles on such a light, like sort of pastel background.
Yes.
That's such a huge selling point. I love it. My BI, my Argentines, it's harder to notice a color change. If she has one, it's harder to notice it because she's already such a dark animal.
Mm-hmm.
But my morph, BI, she can be very like muddled and gray and browns and very, like, I hate to say it, but kind of unattractive. It's not really nice looking, but then all of a sudden she'll heat up or something changes. She'll be fed and out basking, and she'll just be super light gray and more pastel orange and really wild.
Yeah, it's fascinating, the color change. What really changes color is the Brazilian rainbow boa. They have it's a thermal thing they do at night. And they will, they call it white walls. They get these high white walls on their sides that comes up at night, and they look completely different. So, and they get this fluorescent color to them. If you look on my Instagram, you'll see some pictures of my Brazilian rainbow boas at night. And it is incredible to see them out at night because they look like unreal. I mean, they are the most beautiful snakes at night. I mean, they're nice during the day, but at night, there's nothing like it. It's such a treat. Like, I'll come in here at 2:00 in the morning just to hang out with them, to see them, because that's when they're out. And, they're the world's most beautiful earthworm, because during the day they're always buried. I don't bother them much during the day, but at night they're out roaming around, and wow.
Yeah. Are you at all into any of the arboreal boas? Do you think you'll end up acquiring any?
Not so much. Do you mean like the tree boas?
Yeah, either emeralds or Amazon. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the emeralds are so they're so fragile, and I think they require such specialized care. So I think if I was going to go in the direction of arboreal, I'd be more inclined to go green tree python. I have a friend who's been getting into green tree pythons, and my goodness, they are beautiful.
They are.
And some people are doing some amazing things with those. The babies are so the color on them is so incredible, and that ontogenic color change they go through is incredible. So, we'll see. I think the first python will probably be the scrub, and then we'll see.
You should get a Burmese python as well.
Oh no. I think my big experience will be with the Argentines. I think I want the Argentines and the Hog Islands, and I already have a big North Brazilian girl she's big. But I think my specialty is really in the dwarf and small to mid-sized locality boas. But my business is Benson's Boas, so I might have to change the name. I'd have to go Benson's Boas and Pythons or something,
Just Benson Snakes,
it doesn't have the same, it doesn't
roll off the tongue. Yeah. So, who have been some of your biggest mentors since getting into Boas? Like who have you learned the most from?
Yeah, I think I learned a lot. I learned a lot from Brian Boas. I religiously watch every video he puts out, and talking a lot to him. And then, I have some good friends that I chat with on a regular basis. I don't know if you know Nick Werner from Ohana Reptile. He's a good friend of mine, and and we chat a lot. He's recently been getting into breeding in the last couple of years, and so he's going through the same experience as I am, and we compare notes a lot, and so it's been very helpful. And, I've been able to interact with, Dennis from Ace Boas a lot, and just people, people are wonderful in the industry as far as most people are very willing to help out and, give advice. I've found that as long as you're receptive to learning, and as long as you don't come in, I guess there's something called an ask hole. It's someone who asks a lot of questions and then never retains that information and never uses it. Yeah. And they're just holes, they don't ever, it's just like a sinkhole. But if you take in that information and learn from it and are receptive to it, then I think people are more willing, and show that you have done some research beforehand and respect the knowledge that you're listening to. I think people are more willing to provide information, and that's what I found. I respect those who've come before me a lot. We're still all learning, but I don't have a problem, giving respect to those who've come before me at all, because I know when I was younger and when I was rescuing these snakes from my cats, there was no information out there. All I had was the World Book, the Encyclopedia Britannica. There was nothing out there. There was no internet. And I know that people had to come up with all this information from experience. They had to figure it out. So I was figuring things out. And so I think we all stand on the shoulders of those who came before us. And it's one of the reasons I'm so willing to provide help to people who reach out to me. And why I will, I try to always make myself available, whenever I can to, people who have questions.
Yeah, it's so important that information is shared, and kind of passed around, and then you have to learn what to do with that information in your own individual setting. I'm sure that the way that Brian keeps is probably, he could give somebody like you parameters and guidelines, but the way that you're going to accomplish those things is going to vary greatly because you're in such a different climate than he is.
That's right. Yeah. In California, it's going to be different than me here in Connecticut.
Exactly.
And understands Connecticut because he was originally from Connecticut. So we have that kind of in common.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah. It was kind of one of the things we bonded over because he was from Connecticut. And
oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's funny. So how many breeding seasons have you been through? How many times have you paired up animals?
So this is actually this past season was my first season.
Okay.
Where because I've raised all my animals up from babies. And locality boas are, especially the BCCs, you have to wait quite a while for them to be mature enough to breed. They're not like the morph boas, that are imperator based, where you can start breeding them. I mean, the males, some of them are like 18 months old. People are breeding them. The locality boas, you have to, some of them are like 6-7 years before they're sexually mature.
Jeez.
So that's a long wait.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
So what are some things that you've learned so far just from this season? Has anything stood out?
Yeah. So some of the things that stood out to me were the in terms of pairing, the different timings. One of the things I found was the two pairs that I had going this year, the North Brazilian pair, right away they started courting. When I introduced them, I introduced both my pairs. One pair was Paraguana Peninsula, and the other pair was the North Brazilians. And the North Brazilians started right off the bat. They were courting, but they weren't actually locking right away. But they were definitely, very, very interested in each other. The male, very definitely interested in the female. The Paraguanas were doing their own thing for a long time. They really didn't show any interest in each other at all. And I was kind of thinking, this might not work out at all. And it took them months before they showed any sign of interest in each other. In fact, it wasn't till about 2 months ago before I started seeing any courting activity. And then all of a sudden, the female shed and the male all of a sudden woke up. It was like, ooh, new skin. You're sexy. And he all of a sudden couldn't get enough of her. And now he's locked with her almost every single day. And the timing was so different. So I've just discovered that I don't know if it's each individual pairing has different timings, or if it's, the different species or what. I haven't figured that out yet, but don't give up, if they don't show interest at first. The other thing I'm starting to wonder is whether it's a good idea to breed on substrate, or whether it's a good idea to breed on a more clean surface, like a cardboard or a newspaper. I say that only because I did have the issue with the prolapse, and that scared me a bit. The interesting thing about the Paraguanas is they are always breeding on the shelf where there's no substrate. They're always up on their shelf when they lock. And the North Brazilians were always in the substrate when they were locking. And he had the prolapse. And I don't know if that was because maybe a bit of contamination got in, and caused that problem. So in the future, I may try, pairing for this season, I may try pairing on substrate that, on a newspaper substrate or something like that. They just put in a huge, like 2 million square foot Uline plant or warehouse near me, so I can pick up paper from them like really easily. So I may start getting rolls of paper from them just for my breeders. I think I
What do
still,
you use for substrate?
I use Reptichip, and
Okay.
and I got a really good arrangement because I was able to do a wholesale deal with them. So I'm able to store it, so that's really nice. So I have a lot of Reptichip here.
That's awesome. So what are you using as triggers to try to get them to breed? Are you fasting them? Are you doing temp drops? Like what do you think has been most successful, or what combination of triggers?
Yeah. So this past year, the only thing I did was I did a feeding glut in the summer. So in the season before breeding, I built up both the male and the males and the females in the season before, got them to be, a little bit heavier than I normally would, so that they were in great condition before I started pairing them. And I'm glad I did that because, they work hard during breeding and they get fed much less frequently. So I separate them during breeding about once a month for feeding. And I feed both the male and the female, but I feed them smaller prey items than they usually get. To maintain their energy and their weight, you want them to be, and to feel like I think it helps them feel like they're in a good spot to breed. They have enough resources to breed and produce. I think if they felt challenged nutritionally, they probably wouldn't be as willing to breed. So that's just the philosophy I'm using. So I think building them up nutritionally and, so that their biology thinks that they're in good condition to reproduce, I think is important. I did not do temperature drops, but one thing I did was I humidity cycled them. So particularly, I produced kind of a rainy season and in conjunction with that feeding glut. So it produced kind of like a tropical rainy season where there was a lot of food opportunity and rain. So I kept their enclosures more humid than normal. And then when I paired them, they were, I thought, in that ready season.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I'll do the same thing this year. I think I'm definitely going to feed them up for the season. I've already just started in this next feed cycle. I'm going to start preparing my breeders for this coming season. And I haven't done temperature drops. I'm a little wary of that. I know people who do temperature drops, and sometimes it can cause respiratory infection, and I'm a little wary of going that route.
What did it look like when you were giving them more food to kind of bulk them up before breeding season? Like what span of time? I know you said summer, but like what months did that span across?
Yeah. So they end up getting paired at Thanksgiving. So I started that bulking up. Let's see. So we're in June. We're just starting June now. And that's when I start the bulking up process. So I will start building them up in June. And they'll continue to build up from June until Thanksgiving.
Okay, and how does that, like, if you how are you normally feeding those animals? Are they feeding every 3 weeks or
That's
once a
right.
month? And okay, and then how are you feeding them during that time of plenty?
Right. So during the time of plenty, they'll probably go to 2 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah. So the animals that are on so for example, I'll take for example the pair that I'm preparing right now. They are a Longicauda pair, and they are on medium rats right now every 3 weeks. So they will go to medium large rats, and they'll go to every 2 weeks.
Okay. All right, interesting. And do you think that when you're going through the winter and everything, that they are experiencing some temperature drop just ambient? Like, do you think that there's like some difference that would not, like, do you think it just feels different in your room compared
Yeah.
to the summertime?
I think what I'll do is I will lower my ambient a little bit. My ambient in the summer, I've kept at 75. I may lower it a bit. I think I'll lower it to probably closer to 70. And I will do that probably over the course of a couple months. I'll probably start lowering it. I think I'll start lowering it in October, and I'll get it down to 70. And I think what I'll do is I'll also start changing the humidity a bit.
Okay.
So I'm going to try that this year. Last year, I was in the process of moving into this room right around that time frame. So it was a little tough because I was still tweaking the parameters of the room.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to change too much on them because literally I had just moved into the room and everything had changed on them, so it was like kind of like a throwaway year in a way. I was like, I don't even know if I'm going to be successful because, they had been completely uprooted.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, who knows? Maybe even that helped a little bit.
Who knows? The proof is still in the pudding.
Yeah. So, what do you use for food items? Are you using exclusively rats and mice, or do you use any chicks or quail?
So right now, everything is on rats and mice, and I tend to go from I'm feeding from Lane Labs. That's who I get my rats and mice from. I've been pretty happy with them. I have tried rabbits, but I find actually I've only got one boa right now that's big enough for rabbits, and she didn't like them. And rabbits are expensive. So when a boa doesn't like rabbits and you have to throw it out, it's distressing.
Yeah, for sure.
So I've stuck with that. I have occasionally supplemented with quail, especially for soft feeders. I actually did a video on Dumeral's boa. I have a Dumeral's boa as well. That's a pet. And, he was a soft feeder to start. And, I started him on quail and then transitioned him off of the quail to rats. And, quail is like crack for Dumeral's boas. They're like so into quail. And I ended up doing like Frankenstein rats with quail stuck into them. Like I was putting quail wings into the rats.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's disturbing.
It was very disturbing. It was very disturbing. It's something I never dreamed I'd be doing when I look back on my life. I would have never pictured I'd ever be doing that. But here
one day when I retire, I'm going to mutilate rats and put wings on them.
It was not something I ever envisioned doing, believe me. But what we do for our boas.
Yeah. Do your feeding woes continue with the Dumeral's boa, or was it just getting it started?
It was just getting him started, and now he's a machine. In fact, I've had to be. He was one of the first ones I had to be very careful about hook training, tap training, because his feeding response is like a freight train.
Yeah.
And, they're big, powerful boas. And one time, before I realized I needed to tap train him, he was one of my first boas. And I reached in there and he was buried. I didn't even know where he was. Because they blend in with the substrate so well. And I have a lot of leaf litter in his enclosure because they love the leaf litter and they blend in. And he was camouflaged so well. And I had no idea where he was. And I reached in to do something with his water bowl. And whammo, he came flying across and got me in the arm. And the bruise that left, oh my goodness. I mean, he let go right away. But I'm like, wow, that was like getting hit by a... So I'm like, okay, tap training.
How big was he at the time when that happened?
He wasn't that big. He was like 3 feet. but
Wow.
he could really put a whammo on you.
Yeah.
And of course, they come at you with a 180 mouth. It's like the, wide
Oh, yeah.
open mouth.
Yeah. Yeah. They are very strong animals. I mean, even just, the, my Argentine, like if she wants to hold on, that she's holding on to you for sure.
Oh
Just
yeah,
the muscle they have is wild.
yeah. The one I got last week, the bite I got last week was from a Bolivian, an adult Bolivian, and they have those big jaw muscles, those big wide flat, heads, and
Yeah.
and she's gotten me before, and it was a good wrap and a food wrap bite. And I had to use a little bit of hand sanitizer in the corner of her mouth to get her to release. And she did release, but she lost a tooth in my hand. And that one was a good one.
Wow.
In fact, she was discolored for a while with my blood. I had to give her a bath.
Jeez Louise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
They can be such chill snakes to hang out with, but man, if they're turned on and hungry, forget about it.
They love to eat.
Yeah.
But look how chill,
Oh yeah. Yeah, they're a great pet snake to interact with for sure.
Yeah. I mean, this guy just hangs out like this. He's like so cool.
So what are you what are you most excited about pairing up next year? Like or not next year, but this coming season rather.
Yeah, this season I've got Lawn Jacata going, and I'm pretty excited about them because they are spectacular animals. I'm just a little bit nervous because the female is very forward. She's very she can be intimidating, and I'm hoping she doesn't. I'm hoping she doesn't intimidate the male. The male is actually bigger than the female, which is kind of odd. But she's a force to be reckoned with, and
Wow.
they're both pretty big. They're both close to 6 feet, and she's a powerful one. So I've seen her scare him. One time I had them both out on the boa gym at the same time, and he was very interested in her, and he came kind of shooting up. Of course, he came towards her too fast, and she gave him a warning shot. Like, she just launched at him, and he got scared. So I'm going to have to monitor that pairing really closely to make sure that he doesn't get attacked. So I'm a little nervous about it, but I'm also looking forward to it because, boy, they are beautiful animals.
Yeah. Boy, yeah, that sounds a little concerning.
Yeah, I mean, people need to realize that breeding is it's risky for your animals. The other thing that the big transition from keeping to breeding is that you can't handle them while you're breeding. And like my breeding pairs, I haven't been able to handle them for 6 months, and I miss it because I'm, very involved in, handling my animals as they raise up. That's why they're all so docile, I think, and used to me. But once they go into breeding, you really can't mess with them. You pretty much leave them alone. I pull the males from out of the cage and put them back into their own cages during feeding, because I wouldn't feed them in the same enclosure. That's just asking for trouble. But the females I don't touch the whole time. And, I miss it. And, there's a risk to breeding, look at my male Brazilian. He had the hemipene surgery. So, things can go very wrong. And, in the egg-laying species, you can have, trauma like egg binding. In the boas, you can have issues with your females. Things can happen. You can lose females. You can lose males, and there's been cases of, snakes killing each other. So it can be scary. And so you're taking a risk with animals you love. And I think sometimes they don't stop to think about that when they're buying Boas from breeders, that the risk that the breeders are taking with these animals that they've taken 7 years to raise.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
And, and we love these animals. I mean, I do. I love them. They all have names, they all have personalities. I've handled each one of them, many times a week, over their entire lifetime. So they mean a lot to me.
How many do you have altogether?
So I have enough to keep me busy and out of trouble, and never enough.
That's a good answer. That's a solid answer. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's, and I'm sure the number, it's going to be going, hopefully it'll be going up here soon.
Yeah, it's going up a bit.
Yeah.
I tell my husband I'm all done, but it's not true.
Yeah. No, you're just getting started.
And of course there'll be holdbacks,
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, you can't sell off. I mean, what if something were to happen? You got to hold on to the next generation.
Yeah.
All right, Lisa. Well, is there anything else you want to touch on, or is that everything? I think we covered a lot of topics.
Yeah, I think we did.
All right. Well, I appreciate you coming on, and I encourage everybody to go check out your YouTube channel and see what shenanigans you're getting into over there.
Yeah, I'm trying to put out content, educational content about once a week. Sometimes I slack a little bit, but I'm trying to do something about once a week on my YouTube channel. And I'm very regular posting on Instagram. So I've gotten into snake photography. That's another part of this hobby that I really enjoy, is trying to capture pictures of these guys doing what they do, sometimes in their enclosure, sometimes in hand, and just capturing the beauty of them. They're just such beautiful creatures. So I love capturing them in different poses and doing the things they do.
Yeah, they really are beautiful. What are you using for photography? Are you using your phone, or do you have a DSLR that you use exclusively for that?
I have an iPhone 15 Pro, and
Okay.
it does a really good job with photos.
Yeah, it's incredible what phones can do now.
Yeah, I had a 10X, before, and the difference between the 10 and the 15 is remarkable. So I'm really enjoying playing with that and learning how to use the different settings. The photography aspect of it is really, really intriguing to me too. And how to, snake photography takes a lot of patience too. Trying to get them in a pose that shows off their the snake in the right, trying to get a red tail, for example, to show its tail and its head at the same time. Not easy.
Yeah, it can be difficult for sure.
But it's been such a pleasure talking to you, Adam.
Yeah, Lisa, thank you so much for stopping by, and thanks for coming on the Discord too. And your presence there is greatly appreciated, and I appreciate what you're doing. And man, it's you have a lot that going on to inspire people. There's a lot you're keeping at a very high level, and it's great to see that.
Thank you. In the coming years, I'll be ramping up in the breeding, with my other localities. I think next year I'll have a lot more going on. I think my Amaryllis and my Tarahumaras will be ready. So you'll see some more activity coming out of here. So
fantastic. Looking forward to it. Yeah. Good luck.